When a small-town mechanic pulled two little girls from a burning car, he never expected helicopters to land on his farm the next morning. He never expected the girl's mother to be a billionaire. And he certainly never expected her to ask him to pretend to be her husband. This is a story of an ordinary hero and the extraordinary love he never saw coming. Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands as the sun began its descent over the rolling hills of Cedar Creek, Montana. His small auto repair shop sat at the edge of his family's farm, a modest operation he'd inherited from his father 3 years ago. At 32, Jake had made peace with his quiet life. He fixed cars, tended to his few acres of land, and every Sunday he had dinner at Maggie's diner, where she'd inevitably try to set him up with someone new. He was closing up for the night when he heard it, a sound that made his blood run cold. The screech of tires, followed by a sickening crash somewhere down the old county road. Jake didn't think. He just ran. His boots pounded against the gravel as he sprinted toward the sound, his heart hammering in his chest. When he rounded the bend, his stomach dropped. A black SUV had careened off the road, its front end wrapped around an old oak tree, and flames were already licking at the hood. But it was the screaming that nearly broke him. High-pitched, terrified screaming coming from inside the car. Children. There were children in that car. Jake reached the vehicle in seconds, his hands already working at the back door. The heat was intense, the smoke making his eyes water. Through the cracked window, he could see them. 2 little girls, identical, strapped into their car seats, their faces streaked with tears. The driver's seat was empty. The front airbags had deployed, but whoever had been driving was gone. Jake didn't have time to wonder about that now. The door was jammed. He could feel the metal giving way to the growing heat. Without hesitation, Jake grabbed a rock from the roadside and smashed through the window, ignoring the glass that bit into his forearm. He reached inside, his fingers fumbling with the first car seat buckle. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I've got you. I've got you both." The first little girl, her green eyes wide with terror, wrapped her tiny arms around his neck as he lifted her free. He set her down a safe distance away. "Stay right here, okay? Don't move." He ran back for the second one. The flames were spreading now, the smoke thicker. His lungs burned as he reached in again, his hands finding the second buckle. It was stuck. The mechanism was jammed. "Please," he whispered, yanking at the buckle with all his strength. "Please," he whispered, yanking at the buckle with all his strength. It gave way just as the flames reached the back seat. Jake pulled the second girl free and ran, clutching her to his chest. He was barely 10 feet away when the gas tank caught, sending a ball of fire into the evening sky. He collapsed onto the grass, both girls now in his arms, all 3 of them coughing and shaking. The first little girl was crying, but she reached out to touch his face. "You saved us," she whispered. "You're a hero." Jake looked down at the 2 identical faces, their matching green eyes, their curly brown hair, now tangled and smoky. Something shifted in his chest. Something protective and fierce. "What are your names, sweethearts?" he asked gently. "I'm Lily," said the first one. "And this is Rose. We're twins. Where's your mom, your dad?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "Mommy wasn't in the car. It was just Marcus. He's our driver." But he ran away when the car crashed. Jake felt a flash of anger at whoever this Marcus was, abandoning 2 5-year-olds in a burning vehicle. But he pushed it down. Right now, these girls needed him. "Well, Lily and Rose," he said, managing a smile, "my name is Jake, and I promise you, you're safe now." The next few hours were a blur of ambulances, police cars, and questions Jake couldn't fully answer. The girls were checked by paramedics and declared miraculously unharmed, just shaken and scared. But when the officers asked about their parents, the girls could only give them their mother's first name. Vicky died. No last name. No phone number. Just Vicky. It was Maggie who arrived with blankets and hot chocolate, her kind face creased with worry. She'd heard the sirens from the diner and come running. "Jake Morrison," she said, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "You could have been killed. They're just kids, Maggie." He watched as Lily and Rose sat in the back of the ambulance, holding hands. "I couldn't just leave them." The police couldn't locate the driver, Marcus, and with no way to reach the girl's mother, Jake found himself making a decision that would change everything. "They can stay with me tonight," he said. "My farmhouse has spare rooms. Better than spending the night at the station." The officer looked hesitant, but Maggie vouched for Jake, and small towns had their own way of doing things. Forms were filled, promises were made, and by midnight, Jake was tucking 2 little girls into the guest bedroom of his farmhouse. "Will you stay until we fall asleep?" Rose asked, her voice small. Jake pulled a chair beside the bed. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily reached out and grabbed his hand. "Mommy says strangers can be dangerous, but you're not a stranger anymore, are you, Jake?" "No," he said softly. "I am not." He sat there until their breathing evened out, until the fear finally left their little faces. And as he watched them sleep, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Hunty. So. Depin. Dalmo ador. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat on his porch, watching the stars and wondering who these girls' mother was, where she was, and why her children had been alone on a rural Montana road with only a driver who'd abandoned them at the first sign of trouble. The answer came at dawn. Jake was making pancakes when he heard it. A sound completely foreign to Cedar Creek. The thundering of helicopter blades. Not one helicopter. 3. He stepped onto his porch, spatula still in hand, and watched in disbelief as 3 black helicopters descended onto his property. His cows scattered. His chickens fled to the barn. And from the lead helicopter emerged the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She wore a gray designer suit that probably cost more than his truck, her chestnut brown hair whipping in the wind from the blades. But it was her eyes that caught him. Green. The same shade of green as the 2 little girls now running out of his farmhouse in their borrowed pajamas. "Mommy!" Lily and Rose flew across the yard and into the woman's arms. She dropped to her knees in the grass, her expensive suit forgotten, and held them like she would never let go. Jake could see her shoulders shaking. She was crying. Behind her, men in dark suits fanned out across his property, speaking into earpieces. One of them approached Jake with a look that was equal parts suspicion and assessment. "Mr. Morrison?" the man asked. "That's me. I'm David Chen, head of security for Sterling Aerospace. The woman you see there is Victoria Sterling. Those are her daughters." Jake's mind raced. Sterling Aerospace. Even in Cedar Creek, he'd heard of them. The massive aerospace and defense company headquartered in New York, one of the largest private corporations in the country. "The Billionaire?" Jake asked, his voice hollow. "The Billionaire," David confirmed. "And she's been out of her mind for the past 18 hours trying to find her children. Your local police took quite a while to route the information properly." Victoria Sterling stood, Lily on one hip, Rose on the other, and walked toward Jake. Up close he could see the exhaustion in her face, the remnants of tears, the fierce maternal love that seemed to radiate from her entire being. "You're Jake," she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded, suddenly very aware that he was wearing a faded flannel shirt and holding a spatula. "My daughters tell me you pulled them from a burning car." Her voice cracked. "They tell me you're a hero. I just did what anyone would do, ma'am." Something flickered in her green eyes. "Victoria, Please. And no, Mr. Morrison, not anyone. Not the driver I trusted with their lives. Her jaw tightened. Marcus has been found. He's being dealt with. Jake didn't want to know what being dealt with meant for a billionaire. I also hear you stayed with them all night, Victoria continued. That you made them feel safe. That Lily told you she wasn't scared because you were there. They're good kids, Jake said simply. Victoria Sterling studied him for a long moment as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then, she did something that surprised him. She extended her hand. Thank you, Jake Morrison. You saved the only things in this world that matter to me. Jake expected the billionaire and her helicopters to disappear as quickly as they'd arrived. He expected his life to return to normal. Oil changes, fence repairs, Sunday dinners at Maggie's. But Victoria Sterling didn't leave. There was an issue with the helicopters, she explained. Technical difficulties that would take a day to resolve. And the twins, they were tired and shaken. They didn't want to fly again so soon. Could they possibly stay just a bit longer? Jake found himself agreeing before he could think of a reason to say no. What was supposed to be one day became two. The twins were fascinated by the farm, by the chickens and the cows and the old barn cat named Whiskers who had never let anyone pet him until Rose came along. Victoria watched her daughters with a mixture of joy and something else, something that looked like longing. They've never been on a farm before, she admitted to Jake on the second evening. They were sitting on his porch watching Lily and Rose chase fireflies in the twilight. They've never been anywhere that isn't controlled, scheduled, supervised. That sounds exhausting, Jake said. For them and for you. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have no idea. She told him about her life, bit by bit. The company she'd inherited from her father. The constant pressure. The board members who questioned her every decision because she was young, because she was a woman, because she'd had children out of wedlock with a man who turned out to be more interested in her money than in being a father. He signed away his parental rights when they were 6 months old, Victoria said, her voice flat, in exchange for a settlement. He didn't even ask for photos. I'm sorry. Don't be. The girls are better off without someone who could be bought. Jake thought about his own father, a man who'd worked himself to the bone on this farm, who taught Jake everything he knew about engines and integrity and showing up for the people who mattered. A man who would never have walked away from his child for any amount of money. You're doing a good job with them, he said. They're kind and curious and brave. That's because of you. Victoria turned to look at him, and in the fading light he saw something in her eyes. Surprise. As if she wasn't used to compliments that had nothing to do with her net worth. Thank you, she said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the crickets and the distant giggling of the twins. Then Victoria spoke again. I have a proposition for you, Jake Morrison. He raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? Possibly. She took a breath. I'm dealing with a situation. There's a man, Richard Ashworth. He's a business associate who's been putting pressure on me for the past year. To merge our companies. And to marry him. Do you want to marry him? God, no. Victoria shook her head vehemently. But he's clever. He's been positioning himself with my board, with my shareholders. He's made it seem like a marriage between us would be good for the company. Stability. United leadership. The whole charade. And if you don't marry him, he's implied that he'll pursue a hostile takeover. He has the resources, and he has the support of people who think I should be married, should have a partner to help shoulder the burden. Old-fashioned thinking, but unfortunately my father's generation is still on my board. Jake frowned. That sounds like harassment. It's business. Victoria's voice was bitter. At my level, everything is business. So what's the proposition? She turned to face him fully, and he could see she was nervous. Victoria Sterling, Billionaire CEO, nervous to ask him something. I need a husband, Jake. Or at least, I need the appearance of one. Someone who isn't after my money because he already has his own life. Someone who makes Richard's advances irrelevant. Someone the twins already trust. She paused. I'm asking you to pretend to be engaged to me. Just for a few months. Until the threat passes. Jake stared at her. You want me to what? I know it sounds insane. I know we just met. But my girls adore you. They haven't stopped talking about their hero, Jake, since the accident. And I need someone I can trust. Someone who saved my children without expecting anything in return. She met his eyes. I'll compensate you generously. You can pay off your farm, expand your shop, anything you want. I don't want your money, Jake said more sharply than he intended. Victoria blinked. Then, what do you want? He was quiet for a long moment, watching the fireflies blink in the darkness, watching Lily and Rose dance around the yard with their arms outstretched. I'll do it, he heard himself say. But not for money. I'll do it because those girls deserve a mother who isn't being bullied into marriage. And because I don't like men like Richard Ashworth. Victoria's face transformed. Relief, gratitude, and something else. Something warm. Jake Morrison, she said, you might be the most decent man I've ever met. He didn't feel decent. He felt like he'd just jumped off a cliff without checking if there was water below. But when she smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes, he found he didn't regret it. The next 3 weeks were unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Victoria stayed in Cedar Creek, working remotely while her team flew in and out with briefings and documents. She bought the old Henderson farmhouse down the road, claiming the girls needed more space, but Jake suspected it was because she wanted to stay close to him. To sell the relationship. At least, that's what he told himself. The cover story was simple. Victoria had been secretly dating Jake for months, had introduced him to the girls during a private trip, and now they were engaged. The media went wild. Billionaire Harris finds love with small-town hero. The headlines wrote themselves. Richard Ashworth did not take the news well. Jake saw him for the first time at a charity gala in New York, the kind of event where champagne flowed and people wore suits that cost more than Jake's annual income. Victoria had insisted he come, had sent a stylist to dress him, had coached him on which forks to use. Just be yourself, she'd said, adjusting his tie. That's enough. But being himself in a room full of billionaires was easier said than done. Richard approached them within minutes, a tall man with slick-back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Jake like he was examining something unpleasant on the bottom of his shoe. So this is the mechanic, Richard said, his voice dripping with condescension. Tell me, Morrison, what exactly do you bring to the table, besides a charming origin story? Jake felt Victoria tense beside him. He put his hand on the small of her back, a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. I bring common sense, Jake said calmly, and a working understanding that no means no. Maybe you could use some of both. Richard's smile faltered. Cute, very cute, but let's see how long this little charade lasts when the real world comes calling. He walked away, but the threat in his words hung in the air. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered. I shouldn't have brought you into this. Hey. Jake turned her to face him. I knew what I was signing up for. Men like him don't scare me. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, like she was realizing something she hadn't expected. The evening changed after that. They danced together, Victoria fitting against him like she belonged there. They laughed at the absurdity of their situation, at the whispers following them around the room. And when a slow song came on, Victoria rested her head against his chest, and Jake felt his heart do something dangerous. He was supposed to be pretending. He was supposed to be playing a role. But the woman in his arms was real. Her warmth, her vulnerability, the way she smiled when she talked about her daughters, the way she'd trusted him when she had no reason to. Jake was in trouble. Deep, irreversible trouble. The next few weeks only made it worse. Victoria spent more time at his farmhouse than at her own. She learned to cook breakfast, burning eggs and laughing at herself. She helped him feed the chickens, shrieking when one got too close. She sat with him in his shop, asking questions about engines while Lily and Rose did homework at his workbench. It started to feel like a family, like something Jake hadn't known he wanted until it was right in front of him. "Mommy," Lily said one night at dinner, "is Jake going to be our daddy?" Victoria froze her fork halfway to her mouth. Jake felt his entire body go still. "Well, sweetheart," Victoria said carefully, "Jake and Mommy are still figuring things out, but you love him, right?" Rose chimed in. "You look at him the way princesses look at princes in movies." Victoria's cheeks flushed pink. Jake found himself unable to breathe. "Eat your vegetables, both of you," Victoria said, but her voice was strained. Later, after the girls were in bed, they stood in the kitchen together, the tension thick enough to cut. "Kids say the wildest things," Jake said, trying to sound casual. "They do." Victoria was staring at the sink, refusing to meet his eyes. Victoria.D. She finally looked at him, and what he saw in her green eyes made his chest ache. Fear. Oh, fear. Hope. Hope. Longing. "This was supposed to be pretend," she whispered. "I know, but it doesn't feel pretend anymore. At least, not to me." Jake crossed the distance between them, reaching out to cup her face in his calloused hands. "It stopped being pretend for me a long time ago." She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. They were inches apart, the air between them electric. Jake could feel her breath, could count her eyelashes. He started to lean in, and then his phone rang. The moment shattered. Victoria stepped back, her expression shifting to something guarded. Jake cursed under his breath and answered. It was Maggie. "Jake, you need to turn on the news, right now." With a sense of dread, Jake grabbed the remote. The headline on the screen made his blood run cold. "Billionaire's fake fiancé exposed. Sources say engagement is a business arrangement." Victoria's face went pale. No. Richard Ashworth's face appeared on screen, looking sympathetically into the camera. "I hate to see Victoria manipulated like this. It's clear this Morrison fellow is just after her money. I only hope she comes to her senses before it's too late." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. Richard hadn't just exposed their arrangement. He'd twisted it, made Jake look like a gold digger, made Victoria look like a fool. And the worst part was, Victoria was looking at him like she was starting to believe it. The next 48 hours were the worst of Jake's life. Victoria's security team descended on Cedar Creek. Lawyers arrived with contracts and NDAs. The media camped outside both their properties, shouting questions every time someone appeared. But it was the silence from Victoria that hurt the most. She'd pulled away from him the moment that broadcast aired. Not physically. She still stood beside him for the cameras, still played the part of the happy couple when necessary. But her eyes had gone cold. The warmth he'd grown to cherish had disappeared behind walls he couldn't scale. "Victoria, please," he said on the second night, catching her arm as she tried to retreat to the Henderson house. "You have to know I didn't do this for money. I never wanted your money. I know that." Her voice was tired. "I've always known that." "Then why won't you look at me?" "Because this is my fault." She finally met his eyes, and he saw the tears she was fighting. "I dragged you into my world, my problems. I made you a target. Richard is trying to destroy you because of me. I can handle Richard. Can you handle losing your reputation, your business? Because that's what he's trying to do, Jake. He's digging into your past, your finances, your family history. He's looking for anything he can use. Let him look. He won't find anything. That's not the point. Victoria's composure cracked. The point is that you're a good man, an honest man. And I've put you in a position where vultures are circling, waiting to tear you apart. How am I supposed to live with that? Jake stepped closer, taking her hands in his. By letting me make my own choices. I chose this, Victoria. I chose to help you. I chose to stay. And somewhere along the way, I chose you. Not your money. Not your company. You. Jake, I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Maybe I've already fallen. I don't know when it happened, but I know it's real. And I know that whatever Richard throws at us, I want to face it with you. Victoria stared at him, her green eyes swimming with emotion. For one breathless moment, Jake thought she might say it back, thought she might close the distance between them and finally give them both what they wanted. But instead, she pulled away. She whispered. I can't, she whispered. I can't let you sacrifice everything for me. You deserve better than this chaos, Jake. You deserve a simple life, a normal life. Not helicopters and paparazzi and board meetings. I don't want normal. I want you, and I want to protect you. Her voice broke. The only way I can do that is by ending this. I'm sorry. She was gone before he could respond. The next morning, so were the helicopters. Victoria, Lily, and Rose left Cedar Creek without saying goodbye. The silence they left behind was deafening. Maggie found him in his shop 3 days later, staring at a carburetor he hadn't touched in hours. You look terrible, she said, setting a cup of coffee beside him. Thanks, Jake. She sat down on his workbench, crossing her arms. Talk to me. So he did. He told her everything. The fake engagement, the real feelings, Victoria's fear that she was ruining his life. When he finished, Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Do you love her? She finally asked. Yeah, I do. And she loves you? I think so. She never said it, but I think so. Maggie nodded slowly. Then, why are you still sitting here? Jake looked at her. What am I supposed to do? Fly to New York and storm her office? If that's what it takes, yes. Maggie's eyes were fierce. Jake Morrison, I've known you your whole life. You're the man who ran into a burning car without thinking twice. You're the man who stayed up all night with 2 scared little girls. You're the man who didn't care that Victoria was a billionaire because you saw the person underneath. She grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Now stop being an idiot and go get her. Jake stared at his best friend. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You've just been too stubborn to notice. She shoved him toward the door. Go. Now. Before I change my mind and keep you here to fix my transmission. Jake ran. Getting to New York was the easy part. Jake sold his truck, bought a plane ticket, and was in Manhattan by evening. Getting into Sterling Aerospace headquarters was considerably harder. I'm sorry, sir, but Miss Sterling isn't accepting visitors. The security guard at the front desk looked at Jake's flannel shirt and worn jeans with barely concealed disdain. Tell her it's Jake Morrison. She'll see me. The guard's expression shifted to recognition. The mechanic from the news. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call the police. Jake was about to argue when he heard a familiar voice. Jake! He spun around. Lily and Rose were running toward him across the marble lobby, their faces alight with joy. Behind them, looking harried and apologetic, was a woman Jake recognized as their nanny. Girls, You can't just run away, the nanny started. But Lily and Rose had already launched themselves at Jake, wrapping their arms around his legs. You came? Rose squealed. I told Lily you would come. Mommy's been so sad, Lily added, her voice dropping to a whisper. She cries at night when she thinks we're asleep. Jake's heart clenched. He knelt down to be at eye level with the twins. I came to see your mom. To tell her something important? Do you think you could help me? The girls exchanged a look. That twin telepathy thing that still unnerved him a little. We know how to get to Mommy's office, Rose said. We know the secret elevator. Girls, absolutely not, the nanny began. But Lily and Rose had already grabbed Jake's hands and were pulling him toward a door marked staff only. The nanny looked torn between stopping them and following. 5 minutes later, Jake was stepping out of a service elevator onto the executive floor of Sterling Aerospace. And there, at the end of a long hallway, was a door with Victoria's name on it. Go, Jake, Lily whispered. Tell her you love her, like in the movies. Make her happy again, Rose added. Jake took a deep breath and walked toward the door. He could hear voices inside. Victoria's stressed and exhausted. And another voice. One that made his blood boil. Richard Ashworth. Jake didn't knock. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. Victoria was standing behind her desk, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Richard was leaning against the window, arms crossed, looking smug. Jake? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. What the hell is this? Richard straightened, his eyes narrowing. Security, we have an intruder? Call security all you want, Jake said calmly, walking toward Victoria. I'll say what I came to say. You need to leave, Richard growled. Victoria and I are in the middle of a negotiation. I'm not negotiating anything, Victoria said, her voice suddenly sharp. I told you no, Richard. I've been telling you no for a year. You don't have a choice anymore. The board can go to hell. Victoria's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I will never marry you. I will never merge my company with yours. And I will never let you anywhere near my daughters. Richard's facade cracked. You're making a mistake, Victoria. A massive mistake. No, Duff. Jake stepped between them, positioning himself in front of Victoria. The only mistake she made was letting you think you had power over her. But here's the thing about bullies like you, Ashworth. They only have power if you give it to them. Richard laughed. And what are you going to do, mechanic? Fix my car? Jake smiled. Actually, I'm going to tell you something I learned from my father. A man's worth isn't measured by his bank account or his job title. It's measured by how he treats people when he has nothing to gain. And by that measure, you're worthless. Richard's face turned red. He opened his mouth to retort. Get out of my building, Richard, Victoria said quietly, before I have you removed. For a long moment, Richard didn't move. Then, with a final venomous glare at Jake, he stormed out. The door slammed behind him. The office fell silent. Victoria let out a breath she'd been holding. Jake, before you say anything, Jake turned to face her. I need you to know that I didn't come here to rescue you. You don't need rescuing. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Then why did you come? Jake crossed the room until he was standing right in front of her, close enough to see the tears threatening to fall, close enough to count the freckles on her nose. I came because I love you, he said simply. Not Victoria Sterling, the billionaire. Not the CEO. Just you. The woman who burns eggs and shrieks at chickens and watches her daughters with so much love it hurts to look at. I came because my life made sense before I met you, but it didn't have meaning. You and Lily and Rose, you gave it meaning. A tear slipped down Victoria's cheek. I tried to protect you. I tried to walk away so you wouldn't get hurt. I don't need protecting. I need you. He reached up, brushing the tear away with his thumb. I need your chaos and your helicopters and your board meeting. I need Sunday mornings with the girls and midnight conversations on the porch. I need all of it, Victoria. I need you. Jake. Dole. Her voice broke. I love you too. I've loved you since you held my daughters in your arms and promised them they were safe. I just didn't think I deserved someone like you. Someone like me? He laughed softly. I'm just a mechanic from Montana. You're the man who ran into fire without hesitation. The man who saw past my last name to who I really am. The man my daughters want to call Daddy. She put her hands on his chest, right over his heart. You're everything, Jake Morrison. Everything. He kissed her then. Finally. After weeks of almost moments and interrupted attempts, he kissed her. And she kissed him back with a passion that told him everything he needed to know. The door burst open. Lily and Rose tumbled in, followed by an exasperated nanny. Did you kiss? Did you kiss? Lily demanded. Jake and Victoria broke apart, laughing. Yeah, baby girl, Jake said, scooping Lily up with one arm, while Victoria grabbed Rose. We kissed. Does this mean you're staying? Rose asked, her eyes hopeful. Jake looked at Victoria. She smiled at him, radiant and tear-streaked and perfect. What do you think? She asked him. Montana or New York? How about both? He grinned. Helicopters make the commute pretty easy. Victoria laughed, bright and free and full of joy. Both it is. 6 months later, Jake stood on the porch of his Montana farmhouse, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and orange. The chickens were settling in for the night. Whiskers the barn cat was curled up in his favorite spot. And somewhere inside, he could hear laughter. Jake, Mommy says dinner's ready. Lily appeared at the screen door, her green eyes sparkling. She'd grown an inch since that night 6 months ago. Both girls had. They were thriving in a way that made Jake's heart swell every time he looked at them. Coming, sweetheart. He walked inside to find the farmhouse transformed. Not physically. Victoria had insisted on keeping its rustic charm. But the walls were now covered with photos. Family photos. The 4 of them at the county fair. At Lily and Rose's first day at Cedar Creek Elementary. At Maggie's diner, where the twins had declared her pancakes the best in the world. Victoria was in the kitchen, pulling something out of the oven. She'd gotten better at cooking. Not great, but better. Jake had learned to keep a fire extinguisher nearby just in case. What's for dinner? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Lasagna. And before you ask, yes, I followed the recipe this time. Progress. She turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. How was your day? Fixed 3 cars, convinced Mr. Henderson that his tractor does not need racing stripes, and had a very serious business meeting with 2 potential interns. Let me guess. Lily and Rose, they want to learn how to change oil. Apparently, it's very important for their future careers as race car drivers. Victoria laughed. Last week, they wanted to be astronauts, and the week before that, marine biologists. I'm keeping a list. They ate dinner together, the 4 of them, talking about their days and their dreams and the silly things that made up a life. Victoria still ran Sterling Aerospace, but she'd restructured her schedule. Remote work 3 weeks a month from Montana IT. 1 week in New York. The helicopters still landed on the farm, but they felt less like an invasion now and more like a commute. Richard Ashworth had disappeared from their lives. After their confrontation, Victoria had gone public with his harassment, backed by documentation and testimonies from other women he'd pressured over the years. His reputation was in ruins. His company was under investigation. Jake didn't feel sorry for him. After dinner, the girls begged for a story before bed. Jake obliged, making up a tale about a brave mechanic and a princess who didn't need saving but appreciated the company anyway. "Is that story about you and Mommy?" Rose asked sleepily. "Maybe." "I liked that story," Lily mumbled, her eyes already closing. "It has a happy ending." Jake kissed both their foreheads. The best kind of ending. He found Victoria on the porch when he came back downstairs. She was wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars emerge. Jake settled beside her, pulling her close. "You know what I was thinking about?" she asked. "What's that?" "That night 6 months ago, when you kissed me in my office." "What about it?" "You said you needed my chaos, my helicopters, my board meetings." She looked at him, her green eyes soft. "Do you still feel that way?" "Every day." He kissed her temple. "Although I've developed a slight addiction to your burned eggs, I'm going to need therapy." She laughed, swatting his chest. Then, her expression turned serious. "Jake, yeah? I've been thinking about what Lily asked months ago, about whether you were going to be their daddy." Jake's heart skipped. "What about it? They already call you Dad. You know that. When they talk to their friends, when they write stories at school, you're Dad." "I know." His voice was rough. "I love being their dad. I was thinking maybe we should make it official." Victoria took his hand, pressing something small and cool into his palm. "I was thinking maybe we should make all of it official." Jake looked down. In his hand was a simple gold ring. "Victoria Sterling," he said slowly, "are you proposing to me? I'm a CEO. I see an opportunity. I take it." She was trying to sound casual, but he could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear, the hope. "Besides, I figured you'd never get around to it. You're too modest." Jake stared at the ring, then at the woman in front of him, the woman who had crashed into his life, literally and figuratively, who had turned his world upside down and made him happier than he'd ever thought possible. "Yes," he said. "Yes, yes, Victoria Sterling, I'll marry you." She threw her arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. Jake held her tight, this woman who didn't need saving but who had saved him anyway. Inside the farmhouse, two little faces appeared at an upstairs window. "Rose." "They're hugging." "Do you think she asked him?" "I bet she did. Mommy said she was going to." "Does this mean we get to wear princess dresses at the wedding?" "I hope so. I hope Jake wears a crown." The twins watched their parents for a moment longer, identical smiles on their identical faces. Then they crept back to bed, dreaming of weddings and happily ever afters. And on the porch below, under a blanket of Montana stars, a billionaire and a mechanic held each other close and planned a future neither of them had expected. But sometimes, the best stories are the ones you never see coming. The end.